parents of Reddit. What are your I looked away for 1 second stories? Went to the toilet, leaving the newborn asleep on a blanket on the floor, on top of a large fluffy carpet. 3-year-old was watching TV nearby. Came back to find baby literally rolled up in carpet like a dead body. 3-year-old sitting on top, with a cushion under him too. Still don't know how he did it at all, let alone so quickly, and how the baby was totally chilled and unharmed. When my youngest was born, my third child had just turned 2. Our ped looked at me very sternly and said, never ever leave them alone together, even for a second. They will drop a baby, to see if they bounce, they will smother them trying to wrap them up like a doll. Never leave them alone. I'm glad he told me that, BC she totally would have done something nuts. I'm currently 1 to 2 weeks, if not days away from the birth of my son, and my daughter turns 2 on the 4th. Thank you for this warning. I'm too trusting with her, because she's generally gentle. I had made lunch for my daughter who was only about 2 years old. It was a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I handed it to her and realized I left her drink on the counter. I turned and grabbed the drink, and when I went to hand it to her she was gone. So was the sandwich. I go to the living room, and she was stuffing it into the VCR. I asked her why, and she said it was hungry. Poor VCR never did work right after that. See, the best way to approach feeding the starving is a little at a time. Tell her to try feeding bits next time, instead of jamming the whole sandwich in. I was round at my buddy's place. He had kids about 7 and 5. Both super nice kids, nice family. We were sitting in the garden with a beer. The eldest had a foam covered baseball bat that he'd been hitting foam balls with. Out of nowhere, he calmly walks up behind his dad and takes a full home run swing at his head. Ducking clobbers him. This bat is coated in foam, but it's still wood beneath it, so it's basically mid-level assault, maybe attempted murder. Dazed, the dad turns round to defend himself, at which point the 5-year-old sees his opportunity and grabs the beer from the table and starts chugging it. Not just drinking it, full on frat boy chugging it out of nowhere. In the 3 seconds it takes me to recover from the shock and reach across the table to stop him, the kids drank about 2/3 of the bottle. Not much for an adult, but a ducking skinful for a kid weighing about 1 stone. Within about 3 seconds, we went from nice family BBQ to concussed adult, domestically abused by a psychopathic 7-year-old, and a wasted 5-year-old. Went real dark real quick. I had taken my 4-year daughter into a public toilet in France, which was next to a main road. As we left, I let go of her hand for a split second as I looked away to close the door behind us. When I looked back she was running into the main road as she'd seen her mum on the other side. From where I stood, my view of the road was obstructed, so I couldn't see if any cars were coming, and she had gone too far for me to catch her. By a complete miracle, she got safely over the road. It sent shivers down my spine remembering the helpless terror I felt when I saw her in the middle of the road. My mother was standing by the side of the road with me, 8, and my brother, 5. She let go of my brother's hand for just 1 second while she searched in her handbag for the keys to unlock the car. My brother raced into the road in front of a car. I can't remember if it was my mother or if I grabbed him. This was nearly 20 years ago now, but luckily one of us hauled him back, so he didn't actually get hit. My mother was so shaken after that I don't think she let go of my brother's hand near roads until he was in his early teens, which went over so well with a boy his age. She's been joking ever since that he's not allowed to cross the road by himself until he's 30. So we took the kids, 7, 3, 3, and 3, to a water park. One of us would stay in the kiddie area with 2 of the triplets and the other parent would take one of the 3-year-olds and the 7-year-old on a ride. It was working pretty well. Note, the kiddie area was mostly contained, but there was no gate or anything. At one of the swaps, we blinked for a second and our adventurous 3-year-old was gone. Instant oh fuck panic. Get security there, staff is looking, I'm running around looking. Anyway, we eventually found him. He had ridden a water slide with my wife earlier and decided that was fun. I'm gonna do it again. The 3-year-old had gone back to get in line for the water slide by himself, and they found him about 2 from the front of the line. At least you didn't have to describe him to security, just point at another one. I had been drinking scotch one evening while doing dishes. So I'm standing at the sink. I hear my 3-year-old stumble into the room, pull a chair out from the table and climb up. I'm not thinking anything of this until I hear a small voice say juice as I turn to watch him dump about 1/2 ounces of single malt into his mouth. This was immediately followed by a gasp, then he turned bright white, then bright red. He went to bed early that night. What do you do with a drunken toddler? What do you do with a drunken toddler? What do you do with a drunken toddler midway through the evening? Tuck him into bed for the nightie. Tuck him into bed for the nightie. Tuck him into bed for the nightie. Midway in the evening. When I was a kid, my mom was watching me play while hanging laundry. When she turned to hang a garment, I discovered a bouncy spot in the grass and fell down a 100-year-old abandoned well. She said that day took years off her life. Edit, so much Reddit attention. I'm blushing and my hands are sweaty. I have social anxiety and now I feel like everyone is looking at me. I'm trying to answer everything I can. When you were a kid, did you need to wear glasses? Because, the way you tell this story, it sounds like you didn't see that well. We lived in a farmhouse that was over 100 years old. When I say a well, you are picturing a stone well built above ground. What I mean by a well was a 20-30 feet deep hole in the ground that was covered over with plywood probably 50 years earlier and left alone. No one knew it was there. Grass grew over the wood rotted away. Then along comes 2 years old me telling my mom I found a bouncy spot in the grass while she is hanging clothes. Not all wells look like a fairy tale wishing well with a crank and bucket. We moved into our new house on Halloween in 2001. Most of the heavy lifting was done, so the wife decided to begin unpacking the important stuff and I would take our 8-year-old daughter out trick-or-treating. We stepped outside and I realized I left my phone. Standing on the front porch, I tell her, "Don't move, I have to get my phone. I'll be right back." Do not move. Narrator, she moved. New neighborhood. Kids and parents everywhere. I'm running up and down the street frantically and, after about 15 minutes later, I spot a family, mom and dad and a handful of rugrats. With mine in tow. They had a good laugh telling me they just turned around and there she was, having appeared out of nowhere. Decided to stay close assuming some hysterical parent would eventually come running. Edited to thank the kind awarding folks. I swear babies that can't even flip over yet can teleport short distances when no one is observing them. You put that thing down in one spot, turn your back on it for 1 second, and then it's moved a few feet away. They can do this because they don't understand how it's impossible. When babies learn enough about physics and object permanence to be able to move and navigate, they lose the ability to teleport because then they know enough to figure out it can't be done. Mine was so bad about this, though we knew from the start he was rolling. Literally had just been born, put in the clear plastic crimp thing, and I just watched this newborn baby roll over to his stomach. Nurse comes in, doesn't believe me, flips him and he rolls over again. Heard he shouldn't be able to do that about 50 times. When my daughter was little, probably about 3, she went with me to shop for some tools. I turned away to look at something and heard behind me, "Daddy, what's this?" Honey, that's an axe. Please give it to me." She did, and all was well, but I'm glad my wife wasn't there, she would have panicked. That moment when you see your kid holding something sharp and or dangerous, and you have to stay super calm, so they don't make any sudden movements. Turning around and seeing a toddler holding a steak knife, you might as well be face to face with a bear. At least the bear is more predictable. My toddler at the time grabbed a stick of butter out of the fridge and tossed it into the fish tank. Minutes later all the fish were floating dead in the fish tank. Last time we owned fish. I'm a former aquarium hobbyist with a fish-obsessed toddler. I will not get her a fish tank until she stops dropping every available object into her dad's coffee cup. So far the worst has been having to leave the remote out to dry for a few days. A fish tank could be so much worse. I was the child in question, 2 years old at the time. We were at the beach, where about 2 feet into the sea there's a shelf, where it suddenly gets twice as deep. My parents were distracted by my brother, so didn't notice me wander into the surf. When they next looked up, all they could see was my hat away floating on the water. Panic set in, and my dad sprinted into the sea. Discovered that I was still wearing the hat, and was somehow floating completely vertical with just the hat showing above the water. Edit. Turns out this is not that uncommon. Remember, when you're near a body of water, never stop watching the kids. My daughter was 18 months old. Standing in between my husband and me in the kitchen, arm distance from both of us. She slipped, fell and broke 2 front teeth. The first kid is for practice. That's why my big C's has more scars than me. As the older sibling I can confirm. Several scars and front teeth broken out, but the ones that stay. Not me but my wife. Our 2 younger kids are 14 months apart. When our daughter was around 3 and our son was 2, my wife went into the garage to grab a frozen pizza out of the deep freezer, and one of the kids, not sure which one, shut the door and locked my wife in the garage. She was banging on the door and could hear the little budgers in there laughing at her. My wife was not amused. She got a flathead screwdriver from my toolbox and managed to unlock the door. This all took 15 minutes or so. When she got in the house they were in their room watching cartoons and eating cookies they managed to steal. They would have left her out there all night. It's funny now 10 years later, but my wife was scared shitless. We have kept a spare key hidden in the garage ever since. One of my uncles locked grandma out of the house once when he was a toddler. She heard him singing, "Flour, sugar, coffee, for sugar, coffee, flour, sugar." Sure enough, when she got back in, there was a pile on the floor of flour, sugar, and coffee that he'd scooped out a spoonful at a time. She said it was worth cleaning up the mess, that she knew exactly what he was up to the whole time she was outside. I'm not the parent in this scenario, but I'll share the story anyway. I was in college and had a club meeting. Some of the people involved were non-traditional students with a toddler, and they had the kid there at the time. Okay, no big deal. He was pretty much entertaining himself. The parents were trying to pay attention to what was going on, much like the rest of us, when this one guy jumps out of his chair with a yell and grabs the kid. Turns out the kid had been playing with his dad's keys and was headed for the electrical outlet with them. Do electrical outlets talk to kids? Because kids are always drawn to them, as if the outlets are saying "Come here." I mean, you give them toys, where you put shaped blocks into the holes that match. They see an outlet with a slit and hold an object that might fit, so they have to try just like the toys they played with. I glanced at the salt, and toddler daughter grabbed a whole new potato off my plate and shoved it in her mouth. She then tried to swallow it and choked. Longest 15 seconds on my life getting it out of her. Learn child first aid, people. They are suicide machines as toddlers. Edit. Thanks for the awards, kind strangers. I'm only 4 years into this parenting gig, but so far it seems like the #1 job responsibility is stop child from intentionally dying. That's pretty much all you do until they are about 8 or 9. She made it to 18 last week. I do wonder sometimes how. My sister baked some cookies to share at work, and when her 3-year-old daughter seen them on the plate on the counter she asked for one. Instead of explaining she wasn't allowed to have one, my sister lied and said they were yucky, implying it was a bad batch. My sister, confident that her lie was successful, turned her back to finish cleaning up. She heard the plate being removed from the counter and turned around just in time to see all the cookies slide off the plate into the garbage. Her daughter smiled and just said, "Yucky. Is that what people call instant karma?" I was making dinner for my twin 18mo when boy twin starts to fuss, so I carefully put the knife about a foot away from the edge of the counter. I intentionally put it away from the edge because my girl twin is not to be trusted. I go change my boy and turn around, and my girl is casually holding my large, sharp chopping knife. I had to get it from her like a hostage negotiator so she wouldn't run away with it. I couldn't figure out how she got it, so I looked at the video, and as soon as my back was turned she was grabbing the cutting board to pull the knife closer and then immediately skipped over the carrots and peeler to grab the knife. I was clearly correct in not trusting that feral child. Went to pee, put my kiddos in their room with the door open and the gate up. I also had the bathroom door open. Come out to find a dozen eggs cracked on the kitchen floor and into the butter and my youngest covered in peanut butter naked. My now ex-husband was sleeping. I walked into our room, woke him up and tagged out. My brain was fried at that point. To this day I have no clue how they escaped. They are 16 and 18 now. When I was 4 I had 2 sisters who were 3 and 2. My parents used gates to keep us in a room, but obviously we wanted to get out. I got on the wheelchair and told both my sisters to push me on the gate. We kept ramming it until it broke, and next thing you know we were free. Children are ducking stupid, but when it comes to being an ass to their parents they are literally Einstein. Woke up once, and my 2 sons had climbed out of a window onto a flat roof. They were 1 and 3. I still don't know how they even got the window open. Convinced my triplet siblings at 3 years old to climb up the ladder onto the flat roof while dad ran inside to grab the water he'd prepared for us before going outside. Obligatory not a parent, I was watching my sister's kids and told them we would grill for dinner and have pie. I went to the bathroom, came back, and the pie was all over the living room. When I asked them what happened, they told me it was daylight savings time, so dinner was now. I couldn't help but laugh. Edit, packed a bag. Don't type before coffee, kids. My year 18-month-old son was playing with his toy trains. I turned on my computer to play my new game Diablo. While it was loading my son came up to me with what looked like chocolate on his hands. I said to myself, where did he get chocolate, and sniffed it. It wasn't chocolate. I turned around to see the most horrible sight of poop smeared over everything. It was a shitstorm, Randy. The floors were the worst. We lived in an old farmhouse and the cracks between floorboards were like a centimeter wide and poop was pressed deep into them. I had to use a toothpick to scrape it out. I learned a lesson that day. Husband reading a sign about watching your children on the trail at Cosbury Falls in MN. Looks up to see middle child heading to the edge of trail. People fall every year. Some die. I was further down the trail with the youngest. He kept a firm grip on her for the rest of the walk. Not a parent, but the kid in the story. I have 2 younger sisters. They are twins, and only 12 months younger than me. When I was 3, and they were 2, me and Cs1 put Cs2 in the washing machine while my mom went for a pee. She came back right in time because we were already playing with the buttons. Christ, that is terrifying and can happen so easily. The horrifying thing about this for me is that I have no idea how to open a washing machine once it's started. And a good amount of them are installed under a unit where you can't quickly get to the plug and disconnect them. Sorry to drop a tragic story, but here goes. It wasn't me, but someone who worked right across the hall from. They had a bed at window height. Young baby was on the bed and the window was open. He turned away for a second to address his other kid. Baby is missing. Baby fell 2 or 3 stories out the window and died in impact. Needless to say, the dad took quite a bit of time off work after that and wasn't the same after. I didn't even know how to talk to him anymore. It that we were ever closer, but it's always at the forefront of your mind even when making small talk. A friend I've known since the 7th grade had a toddler drown in a 5-gallon bucket. Before that she was a picture perfect suburban housewife, happy as a lark. Wound up running off to Alaska and living in remote cabin for a few years. Then she came back to the lower 48 and seemed to be doing better, but then joined the cult and cut herself off from her family. At age 48, she has recently emerged from the cult and rejoined her family, but her sister tells me that she could fall off the ledge again at any moment.